My name is Larry King, and this video is about some travel experiences hitchhiking from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil to Lima, Peru, which is all the way across South America. Some of you may be disappointed that I'm not the Larry King. Well, it turns out I was the Larry King until from 1944 when I was born to 1977 or 78 when Larry King took on the name Larry King. And then people would ask me, are you the Larry King? And, I had to say, no, I'm not the real Larry King. So that was a blow, but I got over it. And then he passed away like 4 years ago. So now I'm back to Larry King again, the real Larry King. And I'm doing these well, I've got actually like 3 or 4 playlists. I've got the travel playlist. I've got dog training tips playlist. I've got marketing tips playlist. And I'll probably come up with one for realization playlists, okay? Although I'm not supposed to talk about that because anytime you talk about realization, you start going blah, 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 and it makes no sense. Okay, so now, why do I share my travel experiences? Am I unique, or are these great? Now, I suggest if you want to go to South America, book a great tour. You'll be in great hotels, nice meals, but you won't travel as a local. You will travel as a tourist, which is good, but it's different, okay? So, why do I share mine? Well, a couple of things. At my 60th high school reunion, which was quite a few years ago now, so I must be getting up there. Actually, I'm 81, even though I know I don't look a day over 80. I know that. At that reunion, I was talking to one of my classmates who got their master's at CU, was a school teacher in Denver, had retired, and she said to me after we chatted for a while, and I have to kind of express how she said it, she goes, "You really lived your life." Since then, that just keeps coming up in my mind. First of all, everybody lives their life. There's no way you can't live your life, but I thought there was a sense of disappointment that you could have done more with your life. Well, each of us do what we do with our life, all right? So, but the idea of having remorse at how you lived your life, that doesn't appeal to me at all, okay? Because we get locked into these habits, these cultural habits, these types of things. The second experience was with some college students here from CSU that I hired to help me with some camping projects up in the mountains, and we used to chat every day, and we used to talk about freedom and liberation, and they would ask questions the following day. And so one of the students said, that he really likes my philosophy of life and that freedom, and that he's going to pursue that 100% as soon as he gets financially secure. He was a business major. Well, I know what financially secure means. You learn in business school what you need for retirement to be self-sufficient. So back when I was a day, it was like $1 million. Now I think it's like 3 or 4 million. By the time you reach that, you are so much in the groove, you're not going to become a free spirit. So we are what we are, and we should never apologize for our existence because, in my opinion, we've been here for billions of years. These fingers have taken billions of years to grow, and okay, I'm going to cut that part out. We'll just take that right out. Okay, so now, disclaimer. I'm not suggesting that people travel like I do, hitchhiking or anything like that, because there's a saying that I've heard, if you dance with life, you dance with death. And I've danced with death many times. Not that I wanted to, not that I planned it. It was mainly through ignorance and like spontaneity. And I just jumped into things that I shouldn't have, really. So back to today's little travel story, which is titled Rio to Lima in 1984. And Dusty, that's my dog, her 80-foot death fall in Brazil. Okay, so I will try and go through those experiences. They're kind of tough. A little bit on my background. I was raised on a farm. We had an outhouse. Looking back, I was kind of a river rat. I would go to the Clear Creek River, which is right by our farm. And I didn't wear shoes in the summer, and I still don't. Quick story, when as a college professor, I would always take my shoes off in the office, and I'd get there really early in the morning, and so I went down to the bathroom, and I ended up locking myself out of my office. So I had to walk across campus in my socks to security to get them to come over, and I told them their story, and then they said, well, you got no shoes. And I said, well, I just told you my shoes are in the office, you know. So again, you pay the price for everything. Okay, as a child, inside me was a desire for freedom. And so the Jack London's book that had been out for quite a while, Call of the Wild, just the name and the dog and the story really appealed to me. Okay, the freedom. All right. Also, I was called to adventure. The idea of going up the Amazon River again appealed to me. Not as a tourist, but somehow I'm in a canoe with the natives. Okay, I don't know how that's supposed to work, but I would just imagine these things, and then later on I would do them. Okay, just a nod to Jack Kerouac's book called On the Road. That was written before I started my hitchhiking. But at any rate, he was also looking for freedom on the road. And he would hitchhike, but he would also stay in motels. He would meet up with poets and beatniks. And so he did have a plan and other people where when I would travel, I'd be totally by myself, except for my dog. Okay? But the idea of being on the road appealed to me once again. I guess I did good in the conventional sense. I got my doctorate at Michigan State. I became a tenured professor for over 40 years at Fordham University in New York City. And these are some of my students. And if you notice right next to me, the student is holding a dog. Well, of course, that's my dog. I would take my dog to class. And if you were not allowed to take your dog to class, then I would put it in a duffel bag and take my dog to class. All right, so that gives you a little bit of an idea of what was going on in my head. Here in the background, this is a picture of Fordham University in the spring where the students are out there, and I miss being on campus, I must admit that, okay? But I want to talk a little bit about, I travel with a dog, and we do hitchhiking, and so what kind of background did I have, what kind of training did I have for Dusty? Well, the main thing for any dog is love. You want to have that attachment, that affection, and then once they understand what you want, they'll probably do anything you want them to do. Okay, but if you don't have that relationship, it may be more difficult. Also, I taught her, because I'm in New York City, I would travel on the subway. The transit police are pretty tough. She learned to go into a duffel bag, which was not very big, but she would curl up in there, and she wouldn't even stick her nose out, even when it was hot. Now, I wouldn't keep her in there too long unless I needed to, so she always knew she'd go in and out and in and out, and so she was really into it. I'd put that bag down. By the time I get the bag on the floor, she'd be in it, okay? I remember one story. I was entering the subway on an elevated platform, which means it's up in the air, so I had to climb these stairs. Well, I didn't really, she weighed like, 40 pounds. I really didn't want to carry her up those stairs, so I heeled her up, walked her up, and just when I got to the top, there was a transit cop. So I learned my lesson. Even when I'm going up a long staircase, I put the duffel bag on my shoulder, and on we would go. All right, a couple of things that I did for training. In other people's dog training, amateurs, I've noticed that they don't release commands. They don't really understand the commands from the dog's point of view. So, for example, you've heard people say, sit, 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 sit. And finally the dog sits, and then they go, look, the dog's sitting, and they go on and they start talking about a conversation about how they got the dog or whatever it might be. So the dog's sitting there, and he's never released. They've never even thought of releasing him. So he releases himself. He stops sitting and he wanders off someplace. Okay, well, if you leave your dog someplace, like outside of a store, you want them to stay there until you come back, whether it's short or whether it's long. So I did two types of training. I would have her outside of a supermarket. I would disappear. I would be around where I could watch her, and then I would come back at basically random times. So she would never know. I could be long, but in other words, if you always come back in like 2 minutes, then after 15 minutes, they may get up and leave. Okay, so random reinforcement works really good. And the other thing is I would go to a dog kennel, because when you're around other dogs, if they're not used to that, even though they're well trained, they will, get involved with the other dogs, and it's a distraction. So I would kind of inoculate them to that by having her sit outside of a dog kennel where there's all this barking and howling and everything. Again, I would disappear, random reinforcement. She would wait there for me to come back. And so that was the way she was trained. And then basically through experience, she knew what was going on. A quick story, I was hitchhiking out one summer. I had my bag by the front door. I had an apartment in New York City. And I got up in the morning, and my dog is gone. She's gone. Normally, she's right there as soon as I get up. And so I'm calling her. She didn't come. And so I started looking for her, and I look all over, and finally I go out by the entrance. There was a little foyer where my pack was, and she was laying on the pack, and she wouldn't even look at me. She just looked straight ahead. She was not going off that pack because she knew we were leaving, and she was going with us. Okay. Okay, another thing that kind of shows that she was fairly well trained is she and I won the New York City Frisbee contest. She was number one, so she was the champion in 1980 in Central Park. I'm going to make a separate video on how I trained her for that, but one thing I will say, I'm not a good thrower with the Frisbee, and when we would practice, very seldom did I get 10 or 11 perfect throws, okay? But during the contest, lo and behold, I had 11 throws. She had 11 catches, all 4 feet off the ground. Winning score. Okay, just again, a little qualification for hitchhiking. I used to hitchhike. My home was Denver. I lived in New York City, so I would hitchhike back and forth. I-80 goes from the George Washington Bridge in New York City to the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, so I would travel I-80, and so she was quite used to that, and I could tell you all kinds of stories, which I'll do later. But when I was on the road, I would always say freedom is no keys. I would have no keys. And it was kind of like you leave your problems behind. I would sleep under bridges. If a guy was saying, okay, I'm going to turn left at Chicago up here, I'd say, well, could you let me off at that bridge up there? And the bridges, the old bridges on the interstate, they all had the same design. It was a slope up, and then it had about a 4-foot ledge. Okay, so we would go up, and we would, I put out my sleeping bag pad and the dog, and we would sleep there, cook there. And it is shelter from the storm, shelter from the sun, and it's and people would say, weren't you afraid being sleeping under bridges alone? And first of all, I was never alone. I had my dog, but nothing bad ever happened to me under a bridge. And in my life, there were quite a few bad things that happened, but so bridges to me were like a safe harbor. In, I guess, 1983, I had this bug that I wanted to go to hitchhike across South America. I had been to Europe. I had done Europe on a motorcycle many years before, in 1967, with a 1967 Triumph Bonneville. That was a great little motorcycle. And but this is what I wanted to do now. So I got the travel book and put a little in there. It's South American Handbook 1984, and right there it says, if you can see that, oh, there you go, 60th edition. So that means in the 1920s, they were talking about where to stay and stuff in all these different countries. So the reason that I mention that is this book has all the details you want. They would say, walk out the back door of this restaurant, turn to your left, and there's the best barber in town, or, you know, some local tip, okay? So this is where I started my dreaming and started planning the trip. Oh, I got me a map and I got me a plan. I was going to land in Rio, and I was going to make my way up to the Amazon headwaters. Now, how was I going to do that? Well, you know, I never had an exact plan, but that was my general plan. So I was going to go to the headwaters of the Amazon. That was my destination. And, well, it turned out things worked out a little bit different for me. But at any rate, that was my plan. So, also, I don't know what this is about my personality, but there's 12 countries in South America. In New York City, they all have a consulate, so I went from consulate to consulate with my health certificate for my dog, my passport, so I got 12 visas and 12 health certificates. And the health certificates from South America would be like these big seals and gold. They were very elaborate, okay? Official. So I was prepared to go in any direction to any country, including ones, French Guiana, Suriname, that you don't hear in most people's travel plans. I felt I had the freedom that I could go there, or I could go to Chile all the way to the tip and Tierra del Fuego. So I was prepared to go. I arrived in Rio. On the plane, my dog was in a carrier. It was United Airlines, so I had a nice carrier. So we come out of the airport, and everything's on a cart. I had a porter, and we go to the taxi cab, and they start to put the carrier into the trunk of the car, and I'm going like, no, leave the carrier here. And it's kind of crazy, even now. It sounds a little crazy, but I had no intention of coming back from Rio, and I couldn't carry that carrier around, so I would find another carrier somehow, some way, to get her home. So that's the way we started. Then in the book, of course, I found a nice little hotel, nice little places to eat, and I'm reading my book, and I was fascinated by this town that they recommended, Oro Preto, which means black gold. And so I went took a bus up to Oro Preto. It is a colonial town, and it is one place, probably the number one place I would recommend that you go in Brazil. It's just kept intact. It's very colonial. It was a mining town. Okay, just a quick story. At that time, Brazil was controlled by the Jesuit priests who would send out expeditions to look for gems, gold, this type of thing. And Ouro Preto is located in the province of Minas Gerais, which stands for mineral gems. So they knew the area was rich, but they found these black stones, and they wanted to take them back to Rio de Janeiro to have them assayed to see if they were valuable, okay? So if they were valuable, they wanted to be able to come back and find the same place, so they drew a map of the mountains, and the Indians call it Big Brother, Little Brother, and it's very distinctive, and so when you found that, you would know this is where these black rocks came from. Turned out when they assayed it, it was the purest gold they had ever assayed, and they rushed back, and the fog was down. Normally, the fog every morning is in Ouro Preto, and then it would lift in the afternoon. The fog stayed down for 3 days. They're looking around. They were lost. They couldn't find Big Brother, Little Brother. Finally, one afternoon, the fog lifted. And hallelujah, there was Big Brother, Little Brother. Here was the rich gold deposit. And it was a miracle, according to them. And so they built a cathedral on that exact spot, which stands for the day, okay? The local Indians tell the story a little bit different, that what they say is that God held down the fog for 3 days, hoping the Jesuits would go away, okay? Got to Ouro Preto, I looked in my book, I got myself a nice hotel, I'm out on the street, I meet this guy, Francisco, who was Portuguese. And lo and behold, San Francisco, his wife Suzanne, and his 3 kids came to my hotel and kidnapped me. Basically, they actually packed up my stuff, carried the bags out, and we went to their home. So the rest of my stay in Ouro Preto was in their home. Francisco, he was Portuguese. Susan was Indian, native local. And so that was, again, getting local experiences that were, treasured. Except for one thing. It turned out that it was a fateful visit for both me and my dog. So one of the things that he introduced me to was this Indian festival, which was up on this hill. I didn't know it was a plateau, but we go up on this hill, and I had the Frisbee, and so I'm throwing the Frisbee, and I can have tears in my eyes for this. I'm going to put that Frisbee catch back on the screen here. Okay, so we walk up to this hill, and the festival's going on. I have my Frisbee, I'm throwing it, she's catching it. Okay, so I threw one, it was a little long, the wind picked it up, and it landed on this grass, and it was just kind of like that. And so Dusty came, she hit that, and it turned out that that was the edge of a cliff. Not only a cliff, but it actually came backwards. So the second you went off there, you were in thin air, and you were 80 feet above the ground. All right? We measured that later, at least Francisco did. So, you can't even imagine. I had a dead dog. I was, I'm throwing the Frisbee, so of course it was just horrible. So we make it down there finally, and she was alive. How? I don't know. I remember with my tongue, I licked out the dirt in her eye. It was like caked, all just solid mud or dirt or whatever. So I cleaned out her eye and carried her home and kind of put her, she had a little place under the bed, and she didn't move for 2 days. I would chew food and put it out there, and she would kind of lick it. But she was one sick, hurt puppy. Okay, so after the second day, I said I'm going to carry her out to see if she can go to the bathroom, and she did. She had a little teeny poop, and Susan, she goes over, no gloves or worries or anything. She picks it up, and she's going like this, and of course I didn't know exactly what she was doing, but finally she looks at me and she says, "No blood." Okay, I guess that means no internal injuries, or she was looking for that. That wouldn't have been good. So after a few days recovery, that's really the end of this story. Here you go to a country and you got all these plans, and this is the way you end up. So we took a bus to Sao Paulo, where there was a animal hospital. I had her x-rayed, miracle. She had no broken bones. Although I know later in life she got very stiff, and I'm sure part of that was from that fall. But at any rate, just to show you how this story ended, once again, I'm heading for the Amazon. But while I'm in Sao Paulo, I ran out of money, and how I would travel with the money is I had a money belt, but not the kind that you have under your pants with you put your passport and stuff like that. This was an actual leather belt, wide, nice, beautiful leather belt. When you turned it over, there was fabric and there was a zipper the whole length of the belt, and I stuffed that with $100 bills, and that's how I would travel, because in those days credit cards weren't even known in the backcountry, and traveler's checks, they wouldn't cash them either. So cash, the American dollar, worked great. All right, so every day I would go to the post office. I would chain up my dog and go inside, look for the money. Wasn't there yet. I would come back, I'd get my dog, I would go to the park, and I met this fellow, Pablo, and after a few days, we became friends. And how we communicated is he spoke no English, I spoke very little Portuguese, just a few words, And so we would communicate in Spanish. Each of us knew very little Spanish, so it was difficult to communicate. So finally, my money came, okay, and I'm coming out to get my dog, and my dog is gone. I would chain her up to this post outside the post office on the side. She was gone. So somebody had unchained her and taken her out. It was a quick detach. I didn't have a lock on it or anything like that. So I went home. I had a picture of the dog. I made a sign that I had a reward. I think it was like, I don't know what, $200, which was quite a bit back then. Put it right where that was taken. And the next day, there was a telephone call that the police had my dog. Okay, so I go with Pablo. We go over oh no, actually my money hadn't come yet, okay? So we go over, and what they're saying is that one of the young police officers saw these boys steal the dog, and he chased after them and finally caught them and took the dog and took them home. So the dog is safe in his home, but that he did need the reward, okay? So basically my dog was kidnapped for the reward, all right? All right, so how this worked, I don't know, but they let me go home with the dog, and I was going to come back with the $200, okay? Pablo says, no, as soon as you get the money, we're getting on a bus and out of here, which is what we did. And but while we were in the park, I would tell him, you know, I'm going to the Amazon River, and he kept saying Machu Picchu. And I was pretty ignorant. I had never heard of Machu Picchu. And but every time I would talk about the Amazon, he would shake his head no, and he'd say Machu Picchu. He had lived in Peru. He had actually been low level in the cocaine trade. He was a stomper, where with your bare feet you stomp the leaves in kind of a kerosene to start to loosen it up. And then he was also a mule under his poncho, his Indian poncho. He would carry the cocaine, and somehow he got caught. He went to prison in Paraguay, and he came back. Somehow he got into Brazil, and his passport was not kosher. I don't know the story of how he got there, but when I got my money, okay, this is where the stupidity comes in, you know what I mean? I just fanned out my money in front of him, and I said, is this enough for you and me to go to Machu Picchu? And he counts it, boom, 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 and then he says, Machu Picchu. So the one story I will tell you about traveling with Pablo is when we got to Bolivia, which borders Brazil, and we were on a back road, a dirt road that went through this little creek, and you just drive through it, not deep. So we walked across it. There was literally a hut where there was a policeman or border guard in the hut, and he comes out, and I show him my passport, and I show him the dog's papers, all these gold seals and stuff. My dog's already up the road, and he's looking at this seal. He'd never seen anything like this before, and he looks at the dog, and he just gives it back to me, and he didn't know, he didn't even say anything. Okay, but Pablo had problems, okay, and he told me that he would need some money because he'd probably have to do some bribery. So they argue, their voices are raised, and because I had seen him with a razor blade cut one page out of his passport that I guess had some bad stuff on it, and that was detectable. And so finally he comes back to me, and he said, I need a $20 bill. That's all the bribery was, $20. Okay. When I met Pablo in the park, he was playing an instrument called a berimbau, which is a local street instrument popular in Brazil and Africa, and it's made by the locals. You don't buy them in stores. You get a eucalyptus limb, and you get a wire from a motor, okay, an electric motor, and you use that wire to string it, and then you play it with a little stick, And you also attach a gourd to it, which you can go back and forth against your stomach, and it changes the tune. And Pablo played the berimbau the best that I've ever heard. It was literally like unearthly the way he would play it. And I've listened to some. In fact, here, I'll put a little on. This is what the berimbau is. So when we left Sao Paulo and are heading for Cusco, Peru, he takes his berimbau and he breaks it, and he coils up the little wire and put it in his pocket, and I'm going like, okay, what's going on, you know? And then he told me that this is an instrument played by poor people on the street, like homeless or whatever you want to say, and that you would be stereotyped, and they'd keep your eye on you, and he didn't want that. So he had this this old plastic bag that he carried his stuff in, and lo and behold, he pulls out of that this beautiful leather bag, and then he changes clothes into black pantaloons and looked like a silk shirt with ruffles, put his hair back, and wow, that was a big transition. All right, so now he was ready to travel. Okay, so we walked on up the road and continued our travels to Cusco, and I'm going to just show you a few pictures just to kind of give you the flavor of the back road locals and the kind of experiences that you have when you're not traveling as a tourist. Okay, this picture here is this was one of the first buses that went through on this road after the rainy season, and oftentimes they would have tractors there that if you got stuck, if you're on a bus, that they could pull you out. So that was interesting. Okay, trains in Bolivia. All right, was an experience because once again, there's no tourists on the train. They carry, basically Indians and animals. Okay, and they would stop. This next picture. They would stop where there were no roads and where some villages were, and they would unload supplies and that type of thing and carry it by mule back to where they lived. So here's those mules getting ready to roll. So, okay, here's some locals on the street. I would say cute, looks like a girl, but at any rate, cute. And we spent a lot of time in the local Indian markets. We would get up in the morning before sunrise, and in every town we were in, the whole trip, you would hear the roosters at dawn, okay, because they all had roosters. And when the roosters are still crowing, we would get to the local market where the men are called the bearers. They would bring in the supplies for the day in a big bag. And then the women were the vendors, okay, so they ran the market. And so we would be there when they're setting up their tents and this type of thing. So it was very interesting. I remember one time there was, like they were selling meat, and they had these intestines hanging, and like they're like dripping, and I'm trying to talk to him, ask him. I said, so what do they do with the intestines? And she's going, no. And what she was saying was, you put the intestines up there just to show you how fresh the meat is. They don't have refrigeration there, so it's got to be fresh meat. So unless the intestines are dripping, that means it's not that fresh. Oh gosh, another story I saw right there. There was a woman that had a chicken in a little net, and I guess she was going to sell the chicken because she had some corn there, and she would open this chicken's mouth and she'd put in some corn and then she'd just work it down his throat. So after a while I realized that corn was cheaper than chicken, so she's increasing the weight of the chicken by making sure it's full of corn. My grandfather, who homesteaded in Wyoming, they used to do the same thing with cattle. Before you ship them out, you do the cattle drive, And just before they auction them off and buy them, you take them for water, okay? And you drink as much water as you can because, of course, that increases their weight. So I guess human nature is the same regardless of culture. One great experience we had was Bolivia. He takes me up on this hike up on this mountain. It was called something Diablo, the Throat of the Tiger. And as we're reaching the top, these Indian ladies were coming down with milk, fresh milk, again, no refrigeration, and they would milk it and take it down and sell it that day. And so they were happy to sell milk to us because it was less for them to carry. So that was a local experience that I'm sure I'll never have again. So obviously I made it back home to New York City. Safe and sound, barely, I guess, and my dog. And so we went on to planning our next trip, which was to hitchhike to Alaska. Okay, so that will be another video. But at any rate, I think this Rio de Lima was what I consider the trip of my lifetime because it was wild and woolly. Okay, so if I hope that you like this video and subscribe if you want more similar. I have, as I mentioned earlier, I may have mentioned earlier, I have like 4 playlists. One is travel, like this one. I've got one marketing tips, because I taught marketing for 40 years at Fordham. And I've got dog training tips, because I know a little bit about that. And I've got another one that we might call realization, things that I'm not supposed to talk about, because when you talk about realization or you know, transcending, you start going blah, 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 you know, you don't make any sense. So, but I'll probably have some of those too. So all of those may be a little bit interesting in the sense that they're a little bit offbeat and hopefully interesting.